you then, within the group, count the striae, or you just look at the pattern and you did what's called a follow-up, and then look at the pattern, follow up until you reach group number 6, and then you come to a finding that this gives me a pattern that is similar to the exhibit bullet.
I use pattern matching, my lord.
Mina indlela engayisebenzisa ke ukuqhathanisa noma ukubheka ke ukuqhathanisa ke noma ke lebisa ukuthi ke pattern matching.
And just to concretize this point, with pattern matching, we don't do the land counting, correct? We don't count the striae as to how many times they recur and all of that.
No, my lord, I look at the specific pattern, the width, the depth of the furrows, the marks, the specific pattern.
Mina ngibhekayo ke lapho indlela nje ethizeke yokwenza noma ke ekwenzeka ngayo lokubiza ukuthi ke ama-striae kanye futhi ke namagloves kanye futhi nokuthi ke ujule kangakanani futhi uvuleke kangakanani.
And just on that, if I say, for people that are ballistically not educated, if I say you do a follow-on, as you look group, the next group, explain briefly what a follow-on is.
A follow-up, my lord, would be a second set of matching patterns to indicate that, so on your first group you'll have a pattern, you will follow to the next group, there will be an agreement of individual, which will be an agreement of the pattern. You will continue, you match the patterns to each other.
Uma ukhuluma ke ngo-follow on ilapho na ke uma usutholileke koyoqala ke ipattern usundlulela kwenye ke ubheke ukuthi uzothola lokho okutholileke kule ngaphambili bese futhi kuyandlulela nakwelandelayo.
And when you look at the test bullets under the microscope, TB3 to TB10, and you look at the exhibit bullet under the microscope, did you observe what you refer to in evidence in chief as slippage or skid marks on those exhibit bullet and test fires?
My lord, I simply explained as to how one of the means that you can distinguish between whether a 9mm was or a 38 was fired from a revolver. It was just an explanation.
Ngaphambilini ke bengichaza ke nje umahluko ke la ungathola khona ke uma bese ngikhuluma ke nalama marks ngikhulume ke ubona ngama skid marks ukuthi ikona ke ukuchazelayo ukuthi bekusetshenziswa i-PDA noma bekusetshenziswa yona i-9mm bengichaza lokho kuphela.
Yes, but now I'm asking you, within this context, did you see skid marks on the exhibit bullet and the test fires?
I can't recall, my lord. I simply looked at patterns. I can't recall whether it was a skid mark or a specific mark. There was agreement.
Engakubona ke ukuthi ke mina nje kwakhona ke ukuvumelana okwakukhona ke ukuthi kwakunalama mark ke eswabiza ngokuthi ke ama skid marks ke angisakhumbula ukuthi kwakhona yini noma ngakuthola ngakubona yini lokho.
Now, if you look under a microscope as an examiner, and you find that the class characteristics are there, they are discernible, and there are some individual marks, but they are not sufficient for an identification, what conclusion may you, as an examiner, come to?
If there is not enough agreement of individual characteristics, my lord, I would prefer to make it inconclusive, as I cannot specifically say or include it.
Uma ukuthi ke ngiyathola ke ukuthi ke akwaneleke noma ke akukho kuvumelana okukhona ke ila engizothi khona ke uma sengificelela ke emaphethelweni ukuthi ke akwanele ngoba ke akukho engakusho ngesiqiniseko.
But I would record in my notes whether it is positively inclined or negatively inclined, for example.
Kodwa ke lokho into engizoyibhala ke kona ke ama notes ukuthi uma ihlanganiswa ke ngoko-positive noma ke u-negative.
I was just about to come in an examination, and the range of conclusions that you can arrive at are two documents. The first is the AFTE, the AFTE theory of identification, and the second document is the AFTE theory of results that you can, of conclusions that you can arrive at. I just want to briefly touch with you on the third principle of AFTE, which says an examiner comes to a finding, whether it's an elimination, inclusion, or any other finding, in a subjective way, based on scientific principles and the examiner's training, experience, and knowledge. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware, my lord.
Uvumelana ke uchaza ke ukuthi ke kunencwadi noma ke document abayibiza ngokuthi AFTE ke la ukuthi ke yini ke elindelekile noma ke ekufanele ke lowo ongumcwaningi ayenze noma ke uma eseficelela ke noma efinyelela ke emaphethelweni aloko akutholayo ukuthi AFTE kodwa ke incwadi nama document amabini i-AFTE ne-AFTE.
And those combination, the scientific principles, your eye, your mind, judgment, plus your experience, it helps you to arrive at a finding that there is sufficient agreement between the striations on the compared specimen, correct?
Correct, hello.
Uyachaza-ke nokuthi ke iyakutshela-ke ukuthi yini-ke ekulekelelayo-ke ukuthi ihlo lakho umcabango wakho kanye futhi-ke kanye nesilo noma-ke ulwazi lwakho-ke ukuthi yizona-ke ezikulekelelayo-ke ukuthi ufinyeleleke kuloko okutholile.
And in terms of principle number 2 of the theory of identification, in other words, I'm just going to sum it up. I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I don't have my material in front of me. It says, whether there's a level of sufficient agreement, you as an examiner, you must have observed marks that exceed the best agreement demonstrated between tool marks known to have been produced by different tools and is consistent with agreement demonstrated by tool marks known to have been produced by the same tool. And in essence, this leads us to what are commonly known as the known match and the known non-match. Would I be correct in that?
That's correct, my lord.
Are you reading from somewhere?
He's reading, he's summarizing.
It's principle 2. It's a long paragraph of the AFT theory of identification.
I think that's something I don't know. Just goes.
My lord, I just want to point.
No, I've got it, but it's fine. Go.
Is it fine?
Because I'll just look for something I don't know. Just go.
Now, with regard to that, then, I just want to come to the subjectivity that comes to play, especially at the interpretation of your findings. Everything thus far has been under the microscope, but now saying that I am looking at the exhibit bullet compared to any of the test fires, and with my mind and my eye in the mind, I must look first at the marks that were produced by a tool known to have produced that, compared to marks that were produced by tools known to have been produced by that tool, and say, with that in mind, with that background of my experience, this is either an elimination, inclusion, or inconclusive. Correct?
That's correct, my lord.
Ngokuqhathanisa-ke ukubheka-ke ngithi-ke lokhu engikubonayo-ke kubuya kuphi-ke nalokhu kubuya kuphi-ke masikhuluma ngaso-ke isibhamu ukuthi-ke uma sengifica-ke egcineni ukuthi-ke ingqondo yami-ke kanye nalo iso lami yilokhu engikubonayo ngithola khona lokhu kuyiqiniso.
And Captain Serrao testified, I took something profoundly from him to say, we are in fact, as examiners, when you say we, I'm including myself under your category, you are saying it is a match, not because the marks are the same, but the marks are closer to similar. He used a term, I'm trying to look on my notes. He says it is microscopically identical. When you look at the marks under the microscope, they are almost identical.
That's correct, my lord. That is what he said.
Uma kuyilokho-ke akushilo ngoba-ke umeli uthi-ke okushiwo uyena-ke uSireyo ukuthi-ke uma-ke sikubheka-ke lokhu hayi ukuthi-ke ama-marks-ke afane ncamashi kodwa-ke uma sibheka kuyona-ke i-microscope sizothi-ke kuyahlangana-ke noma-ke i-match ngoba-ke cishe kufane uma esho kanjalo-ke yebo.
Now, there's also the length impressions. Can you briefly say what are the length impressions?
The lines are between the grooves, my lord, they are the flatter surfaces without the striations.
Uma sithetha ngama-length lana-ke sithetha-ke la kuyona-ke ama-grooves kodwa hhayi la khona-ke ekunaleya migqa khona-ke la ekuflat khona.
Now, you were asked by my learned colleague, Advocate Sibanda, to give a description or a definition of class characteristics and individual characteristics, but I will add and say that's not the full story, because there are what are called subclass characteristics, correct?
There is subclass characteristics, my lord, there is such a thing, that's correct.
Kuyiqiniso yabo ikhona-ke into ebizwa ngokuthi-ke ama-subclass.
And what are those subclass characteristics?
My lord, subclass characteristics occur during the manufacturing process. They are limited to a specific batch of barrels produced.
Lokho-ke kwenzeka ngesikhathi-ke sokwenziwa-ke noma-ke esokuveliswa-ke futhi-ke kuya-ke noma-ke ngama-batch-ke ahlukene-ke awo ama-barrels.
Which means that some firearms don't necessarily have subclass characteristics.
Okusho ukuthi-ke ibhamu ey'thize-ke azibi nakho-ke kona lokhu okubizwa ngokuthi-ke ama-subclass.
Now, in order to concretely say the class characteristics, we know those for a bullet, right? We know the caliber, we know the rifling, we know all of those things. With class characteristics, as you compare to individual characteristics, in order for you as an examiner to say, I have looked at individual, I've looked at class, then with that in mind, I've eliminated subclass, which may mimic individual characteristics to an unintelligible examiner. And having eliminated subclass characteristics, I can then say, truly what is left here are the individual marks that correspond with the individual marks on the exhibit bullet, right?
That's correct, my lord.
Yabo lana ke uma usukhuluma ke nalamana ke lona ayihambela ngawodwa noma ke la kuthiwa ama individual nawo ke uphinde uwabhekeke ubheka nawo la kuthiwa ama ahlangeneke noma ke ama subclass.
Can you personally distinguish between subclass characteristics and individual characteristics?
My lord, that is what we are trained for. Subclass characteristics are not necessarily transferred to each and every groove on a specific barrel. It is also an accidental mark which occurs during the manufacturing process. So it could be limited to one groove only. Therefore, I don't identify only on one specific groove. I ensure that there is a follow-up and other markings on other grooves and on other portions of the bullet for me to be able to distinguish between individual and subclass characteristics.
Ikona ke esiqeqeshelwayo ke lokho ukuthi sihlukaniseke ingakho ke uma ngitholile ke ugroove eyodwa ke angigcini lapho ke ingakho ke sengidlulela kwelandelayo ke ngidlulele ke futhi kwenye ke ubheka ke ukuthi ke lokho engikutholile ngizophinde ngikuthole yini uma ngidlulela kuwona onke.
But in order for you to eliminate subclass characteristics, you need to know the batch that was produced that have got those subclass characteristics, correct?
I don't understand the question. What do you mean by batch?
You said subclass characteristics are limited to a shape along batches, didn't understand you, of certain firearms during manufacture.
That's correct, madam.
Now I'm saying to you, in order for you as an examiner sitting with a ocular microscope comparing the exhibit and the test fire, you must then remove or take from your mind the subclass characteristics so that what you are left with are truly individual characteristics and class characteristics for you to arrive at any finding.
That's correct, my lord.
Lana ke ukuthi ke ngizofikanela ke esigcinweni noma amaphethelweni ukuthi ngitholani ke ila engizofanele ngisuse khona ke lokho kubizwa ukuthi ke ama subclass futhi ngibheke wona ke lana ke ayihambelayo ngawodwa ke ama individual ikona ke ekuzongiholela ekuthini ke ngifike noma ke ngifike emaphethelweni.
And if you cannot answer this, you may say you can't answer it. You are approached on the 22nd of July 2020 by Colonel Mangena for an opinion, right?
That's correct, my lord.
What was your rank at the time?
I was a captain, my lord.
Nge 22 July 2020 uma eza kumina ke uKolonel Mangena ezongicela ke uvo ngangi uCaptain.
Therefore you were suitably qualified for him also to have requested you to do a verification, correct?
My lord, my rank has nothing to do whether I'm suitable or qualified to give an opinion as to a microscopic finding.
Ukuthi ke isikhundla sami ke CP ke akunalutho noma akuhlangene lutho ke nokuthi ke nganikeza ngovo noma nganikezi ke ngalo uvo.
Because the criteria simply is that as long as you are a qualified examiner with experience, you can either prefer an opinion to a colleague or be asked to verify the findings of a colleague, correct?
As long as I am trained and sufficient and competent on the specific level, irrespective of rank, you can give an opinion or a verification, my lord.
Okufunekayo nje ukuthi ke uba nje ngitholile ngiqeqeshiwe ke futhi ke bashuwa ukuthi ngikulungele ukwenza lokho ukuthi ke irank ke yipi lokho ke akuhlangene nje lutho.
And similarly, I'm perturbed by this perception of the experts or so-called experts when they come to court and they are asked, what is your high-profile case? Does ballistic look at high-profile cases or they look at bullets from and components of ammunition, firearms from the scene, irrespective of the nature of the personality involved in the offense?
We look at the exhibits, my lord, irrespective of whether it is publicized or not.
Thina ke sibhekayo noma sibuka ke amazibiti ukuthi ke icala leli ke liyasakazwa ke noma cha asibheki ke lokho.
So in your vocabulary there's no, because I learned this from a fingerprint expert. I put a question to him, I said high profile. He says no, we're looking at the case, we're not looking at high profile.
That's correct.
Similarly, the same should apply to you.
That's correct, my lord. The same applies.
Kuliqiniso nakuthina ke ukuthi ke sibheka ke amazibiti asibheki ukuthi ke icala elinjani.
Now, have you ever been requested to verify a finding of an elimination?
I have, my lord.
Usuke wacelwa yini ke ukuthi ke ubhekeke la khona ke uthe cha lokho asikuhlanganisi ngalokho siyakhipha yebo kusuke kwenzeka ke lokho.
Have you ever been asked to verify a finding of inconclusive?
I have, my lord.
Ukuthi nokuthi futhi ke ubhekeke ukuthi lana ke yebo kukhona ke kodwa ke akwaneleke yebo naloko seke ngakwenza.
With regard to the inconclusive finding for peer review, did you confirm or make it an inclusion or elimination?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You've been asked before to verify an inconclusive finding, right?
That's correct, my lord.
And when you verified, you did your independent microscopic examination. Did you then go to the primary examiner and say, no, for me, it's not an inconclusive case, it is a positive case. Or for me, it is not an inconclusive, it's an elimination?
I have, my lord.
manje ke kulokhu ke la uthi khona ke uceliwe ukuthi ubheke ukuthiwa la cha khona ke la esikutholayo ke yebo khona utholakala kodwa ke akwaneleke noma ke akupheleleke ukuthi wena ke uma usubheka manje uthi cha ubuyele kulomuntu ocelile uthi la lokho engikutholayo ke lana cha lokho ke akusuka ukuthi nje akuphelele kuyakhishwa noma ke akuhlangani yebo ngiseke ngakwenza lokho.
Now, in this instance, do you know Mr. Dave Peterson, who used to be attached to the Forensic Sciences Laboratory ballistics section as well?
I know Mr. Peterson, my lord.
Ingabe uyamazi yini uDave Peterson naye ke usuke wasebenza ke la nisebenza khona yebo ngiyamazi.
Now, we as the defense have retained him, and he has examined TB1 to TB10, compared it with the exhibit bullet in the presence of the investigating officer of this case, Brigadier Geninda, and Lieutenant Colonel Mangena. And his findings are that this is an inconclusive case because he could find discernible class characteristics, he could find some individual characteristics, but they are not sufficient enough to make an inclusion. Therefore, he made it a case of an inconclusive finding. So I'm not going to speak about borderline. I don't speak about borderline. I'm speaking ballistics now. This is an inconclusive finding according to Dave Peterson.
I thought he was responding.
I'm not sure what the question
Do you want to comment on that?
Mr. Peterson is entitled. Because we do cases on a daily basis. Mr. Peterson has left the laboratory to my extent on 2015. I don't know how many cases he's been doing.
Lana ke mangikubuza ngaye ke uMr Dave Peterson uthi naye ke usebenzile ke lana ke noma ke naye ke waqhathanisa ngaye uTB1 yofica ke kuTB10 futhi ke eqhathanisa nalo ke inhlamvu lena ke izibithi wathola yena ke ukuthi ke cha lokhu ke akwaneleke noma ke lokhu akutholile ke yena ke akwanele uthi ke ma iphendula ke thina ke sisebenza ngamacala ke ngathi ke ilanga nelanga uMr Peterson uhambe elab ngo2015 angazi ukuthi ngangaka amacala asebenza ngawo.
His opinion will be based on his own experience and training, my lord.
Uvo lwakhe ke kumayelana ke nesipilo anaso ke futhi ke ne training ayithola.
Mr. Peterson also has done over 6,000 cases, but on what he does on a daily basis, he'll come and tell this court. But when it comes to borderline, let me address this issue of borderline. In our consultation with him, he says the reason why Colonel Mangena approaches, and I'm sorry to not name you by ranks, it means no disrespect to all of you. The reason why I approached Felyun, I mean, that's what he says, Mr. Dave Peterson. The reason why Colonel Mangena approaches these individuals, Ntini, Fesser, and Felyun, is because he was having difficulty. This was a borderline case of identification, which could have been made inconclusive. And I told Colonel Mangena during our testing in his Mistrend laboratory that this is a borderline inconclusive case, therefore it should have been made inconclusive. That's why the word borderline comes in.
My lord, I would suspect that that statement is based on Mr. Peterson's assumption and opinion.
Sorry.
No.
Lana ke angitsheleke ukuthi ke okushiwo yena ke uPeterson ukuthi ke ungani ke uKolonel Mangena waya ke kulabantu ke ababiziwe ke ukuthi ke uFelyun abontini kanye futhi ke nalabo abanye ke ingoba ke wayibona ukuthi la kuleqala kwakufanele ke nje afinyelele ukuthi ke cha lana akwaneleke ingakho ayabona ke uma iphendula ke uthi ke lokho ke umcabango wakhe ke yena ke uDave Peterson.
My lord, I'm almost done. May I be given just a moment to go through my notes to see if I have left anything.
Sorry, just for my understanding. How long did you work with Mr. Peterson?
From 2000, my lord, until 2015.
Sebenze naye ke uMr Peterson ukusuka ngo2000 sorry ngo2000 kwayofica ke naye u2015.
And then you say he left
The laboratory.
of South African ballistics.
That is correct, my lord.
Waseyahamba ke ngayo u2015.
To do what? Do you know? If you don't know.
As far as I understand, he's a private expert.
Private?
He started his own company.
Okay.
Ngokwazi kwami ke waqala inkampani yakhe ke ungoti oyimele.
And what exactly it is, I cannot recall.
Ukuthi kuyini ke angikhumbula.
My lord, that's all I have for the witness. Thank you, Amanda.
Why are you going to find the type of work he does? You say you guys work daily with these ballistics.
That is correct, my lord.
Daily.
Daily, that is our core function, my lord, is examination of firearms and tool marks
For the whole of South Africa.
for all the examiners in South Africa.
Umsebenzi wethu esiwenza ke nelanga ke futhi ke sisebenzela ke eSouth Africa yonkana.
Whether you receive a firearm or exhibits on a basis, whether you receive tool marks will be determined by the operational commander.
Ukuthi ke uthola ke ibhamu ke uthola ke ama tool marks lokho ke uzo uyena ke icommander ozokusho ke lokho.
Yeah, man, before just I finish that, like I said to you, what Ms. Peter does on a daily basis. He'll come to this court because it will be wrong for me to put a proposition that he also works daily with firearms when he hasn't given me that instruction. So he'll speak for himself. Thank you.
Uzoyisholo yena-ke ukuthi wenzani-ke noma-ke umuphi-ke umsebenzi awenzayo angeke ngimkhulumele mina-ke uPeterson.
Sorry, and what was his rank when he left?
Lieutenant Colonel Mali.
Waye-Lieutenant Colonel naye-ke uma esebeka phansi-ke khona lapho yena uDavid Peterson.
Yes. Further cross-examination, Mr. Mxolisi.
I realize that we only 10 minutes towards the lunch achievement. So I request that I start with the cross-examination.
What time should we start?
8 to 1. Normally, starting time for lunch is at 2 o'clock.
Is that okay, Mr.?
It's in order, my lord.
You're available at 10 to 2.
I'm available.